oyundan. Beni terk et, mutluluğum bu avoktan. Beni terk et, çık benim dünyamdan. Go.
I keep dancing on the ice, 'cause I feel alive, unsatisfied. Keep dancing on the ice. Keep dancing on the ice.
In my roots, in the mind, and I leave my head back. Mother Nature, she knows. Mother Nature, she knows. I know that Mother Nature, she knows. Mother Nature, she knows. I know it won't let go. Yeah, 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 yeah. Won't let go. Yeah, 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 yeah. I'm on fire, fire. You're a liar, liar. Stop denying, lying, no lying, lying, no more. Like a vampire, you had come out at night. Stop denying, lying, no lying, lying, no more. I'm on fire, fire. Stop denying, lying, no lying, lying, no more. Too epic to be true. But here I am with you. Spark between us, broke the plot for us. Too epic to be true. My life was out of control. So think, let's go. Give me always play okay. La 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 la. La 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 la. La 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 la. Give me always play okay. La 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 la. La 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 la. La 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 la. Give me always play okay.
Fazem-me lembrar de ti, com saudade do teu beijo. És a rosa mais bonita que brotou ao sul do teu.
Solo quiero más. Even if we're living in a mad world, even if there are no more gods to pray for. Solo quiero más. Solo quiero más. Even if we're living in a mad world, even if we're standing as the sky falls. Solo quiero más. Saremo io e te per sempre, legati per la vita, che senza te non vale niente, non ha senso vivere. Con la mano sul petto io te lo prometto davanti a Dio. Saremo io e te, da qui sarà per sempre sì. Regarde-moi, regarde-toi. C'est ça l'amour, ça te foudroie. Regarde-moi, regarde-toi. C'est l'amour, tu ne seras jamais perdu. C'est ça l'amour.
Oh yeah! Oh yeah!
I fight, try, darling, I need something so day. I fight, try, with a slice of pepperoni. I'll play you can obey, not to be a pony. I fight, try, I'm coming back to life. I fight, try, got me feeling okie dokie. I fight, try, goodbye, victory, hello, mate. So let life.
In my era, no more era, so stay out of my way. Dropping all the number ones with white gloves on my hands. Honey, I'm trying to stay where the sky ends. Paving my own ways with what important phrase spray.
Che bella, you know nothing is fair now. I'll keep holding on to you. After all of this time, it's you and only you. Miskin men och pani, miskin men och wick. I rubati di battaglia, Gian la valletta. Un cliff di un sense, e ti nostri dini a dormire. Bella, guardi tristezza.
Lost in the rhythm, it's never enough. Might just have you falling in love. Oh, they want jala, jala, they want jala. Jala, jala, they want jala. I'm dancing on the table, baby, shake my hips so tip that belly. Jala, jala, they want jala, 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 jala. When the applause are fierce and turn all their woes to cheers, I know their roots still carry water. When all the seeds we've sown blossom and lead us on, we'll see the trees. I know you really, really love me, don't lie. Know you're gonna give it some time. So honey, don't cry, honey, don't cry. 'Cause I know you really, really love me inside. Only gonna give it some time.
Das kann doch gar nicht wahr sein, die machen sich zum Affen, um Tänzer sehe ich gar kein. Ich hätte eine Idee, ein Konzept, ja das wäre einfach perfekt. Sie brauchen einen Tanzschein, da muss ich streng sein, weil ohne Tanzschein lass ich sie nicht rein. Haben Sie einen Tanzschein? Das soll kein Witz sein, weil ohne Tanzschein, da kommt ihr nicht rein. Ich schließ die Augen, dann bin ich Clubbesitzer.
'Cause now you're in my head, my heart, my body part. You're always coming back on the weekends. You're in every touch, in thought, in every shot. No, I can't get you out of my system.
talk about numbers all day long. Rumba, let's go. Rock this, rock this. Delete my number from the phone. Rock this, rock this.
I'm a Red Bull, I'm a danger, I'm a mover, but freedom. Let me light you up, let me light you up. Come on, let me pull on so deep. I'ma leave you weak. I'm the bangara. I'm the bangara.
Love and rage, ungrateful child in a golden cage. For Mother Earth, making a change.
Ois viisaampi häipyttää, mut tulevienkin leikin. Miten tunteet vois jäädyttää, kun sä oot liekin heitin. Oh, saat mut paramaan. Saat mut paramaan, oot niin kuuma, mut jää kylmää. Sä oot.
Viva Moldova, aloha, addio vida loca, Soroka, Europa, Palma di Mallorca. Saluti a tutti, Moldova is on duty. E una, e nova, Repubblica Moldova. Hey, 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 welcome to Moldova. Hey, 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 Repubblica Moldova. Sarnevi školi kolovim se. Što više dajem, manje želim.